ask 100 different data scientists regarding what does success look like for a particular product or feature, then there's a very high chance I might get 100 different answers. CTR, conversion rate, revenue, customer satisfaction, retention, session length, etc. etc. While the list can be never ending, majority of these will be completely wrong. And exactly that is why in FANG or MANG data scientist interviews, people actually ask to understand your approach towards creating a metric for a particular experimentation. Because creating a proper metric is rarely about choosing a number, but rather what reality do you want your experiment to present. Because your primary metric, if chosen wrong, can tell you a completely false story. It can show you that your business is performing great while it might be dying inside. It might show you that your customers are very happy while they might be completely frustrated. So exactly to avoid that, we need to spend a lot of time into understanding the problem at hand and then only go towards designing a metric rather than just choosing something from the basket. So in this video, we're going to tackle this exact problem, and for your help, I have included many examples / exercises in this video. So without any further ado, let's dive right in. This is Ankita and welcome to Data Couple. Let's jump into our first section for today, which is what does success look like? Now, you will think that this is the main question that gets asked at the starting of every experiment, but that actually doesn't happen quite often. I've seen teams actually opening the dashboards and going back to find out which are the metrics that are not performing so well and kind of tying up an experiment to those particular metrics. Whereas in reality, when you're doing an experimentation design, you should be finding out what is the experience or user experience I want my customers to have, and then finally back calculate to find out what is the activity or metric that would measure that particular experience, right? So this is how it should be going on. But let me tell you some examples or stories which happened in real life where people actually optimized for a wrong metric. Now, there are three topics that I'll talk about here. One thing is how you can just measure the activity and not the value from the experiment. This can completely destroy your whole product. Second thing is, if your metric is gameable, then that's not a good experience at all and it might be terrible. And the third thing is, if you are taking a proxy metric, which we do a lot of the times, then we need to make sure that we are measuring it on a time interval and making sure it's still relevant. So let's come to the first topic, which is if your metric is just covering the activity and not the actual value, then what are the different problems that you can face? So in earlier times of Amazon, one of their internal teams were actually optimizing for the add to cart rate. Now they made an experiment which made it so easy for the users to add things to cart that their add to cart rate increased by some double-digit percentage. So which was a huge thing. So that means the experiment was working out perfectly and they were on the verge of rolling this out, while some of their team members actually looked into one other metric, which is your purchase volume or revenue, right? And the revenue actually declined heavily. And the story behind this is that since the experiment made it so easy for the users to add things to cart, they were adding 10 different things, and at the end of the day, when they're going to the cart to check out, they're feeling completely overwhelmed and then dropping everything and abandoning the cart. This experiment was a huge example of finding out that if you optimize just for the key activity metric and not look at the overall product portfolio, then it can severely have a negative impact on your overall product. Now the second topic here is that if your metric is gameable or not. What does it mean? Let me tell you a story here again. So again, earlier days of Netflix, actually they had one particular internal metric being tracked for their recommendation system, which was predictive star rating. Now these days you won't see star ratings as much in Netflix because it's not there. These days we just have thumbs up or thumbs down. But earlier it was star rating, and predictive star rating was something which was getting computed internally for them, which was helping their recommendation system. So this metric solely was capturing that how relevant that particular show is for a user. The metric was really improving, it was increasing coverage, etc. But when they looked at another metric, which is the actual view hours, that did not improve at all. That's because they found out that this predictive star rating was actually working very well for prestigious shows. Like, let's say users will give great star ratings to prestigious shows that they would ideally want to watch, but they won't watch, let's say, on a tired Tuesday night. Because when people are actually returning from office, they want something light-hearted comedy shows to watch, right? Not some heavy-hearted or documentary shows, which might seem prestigious but might not be watchable at all times. So just to avoid this, they made sure they're moving away from this predictive star rating system and added actual view hours in their recommendation system. And it changed their whole recommendation system. It started recommending a more light-hearted but not so prestigious shows which had actual view hours compared to some prestigious documentary shows. So here one law actually comes into point. It's known as Goodhart's law. Is that if you are solely going behind an activity and your activity is becoming your measure, then it ceases to be a good measure. That means if your metric becomes gameable and if you can artificially inflate your metric without making your product actually better, then you're definitely choosing a wrong metric. So change that. Now the third topic is about if your proxy metrics are still faring well. Now what are proxy metrics? Quickly to tell you, let's say a lot of the cases, whatever experience we are rolling out to users, those are not exactly measurable. Like let's say Google cannot measure how satisfied their customers are, or let's say LinkedIn cannot measure how much professional value is it adding to the community. So it always, in these cases, will have to go ahead with some kind of proxy metric which works as a proxy for our overall customer satisfaction, right? So in the earlier days of Google, what used to happen is that just to understand if the search system is working perfectly or not, they would understand if the click-through rate is working well. But let's say that click-through rate worked really well in the earlier or starting point in time, but slowly when users or let's say the businesses started to understand that this is the main metric they're tracking, they try to game the system. Right? They will add clickbaits, which will make sure that users are going in, clicking on random, blogs or sites, which is not adding any value or basically reducing the overall customer satisfaction. So what Google did is when they found out that this particular proxy metric is not working so well, they added a couple of other measures on top of this. They added something like, let's say, the dwell time, if there's any pogo sticking that's going on or not, which helped them understand which kind of sites are actually better for customer satisfaction, which they should index better in the search, right? So what is dwell time and pogo sticking? So dwell time is nothing but if the users are clicking on a particular site or URL, if they are sticking to that page for a longer time or not. If they are sticking on for a longer time, that means they have some useful content on that page. That means it is highly positive, correlation that's coming out of it. But let's say if they are just clicking on it and immediately coming back to the search page, that means this kind of behavior is called pogo sticking. That means this page was not at all valuable, not at all important. So this adds negatively in the index ranking, and that's how they filtered out all the clickbait URLs altogether. Now comes the second section of this video. There is something called metric ladder in where we would be discussing different kind of metrics that we need to create for each of the experimentation or a product or feature overall.
Now let's talk about North Star metric. Now North Star metrics are those which talk about your long-term business success. You are almost never, just simply moving this particular metric with just one experiment or one feature. This is a metric which is overarching to your overall product. It does not get changed only by just one experiment or one feature rollout, etc., etc. So think of this like, let's say in Netflix, your monthly hours of content would be your North Star metric. For Airbnb, your number of nights booked would be your North Star metric. For LinkedIn, it can be your weekly active users. For Spotify, it can be your time spent in a week or day. Now, this is exactly what North Star metric is. So this is the overall metric. Now let's move on to the second thing, which is nothing but your primary metric. Now, what is primary metric exactly? Now, primary metric is that particular metric which decides if your experimentation is a success or a failure. So this is nothing but a go or no go signal for your experimentation to either roll out or stop. So let's say, for example, let's say if you have a new offer going on for your SaaS product in a page, then you would try to understand what is the click-through rate for that particular offer. How many people are actually engaging with that offer within your experiment window? And let's say this primary metric should be directly correlated or connected to your North Star metric altogether. Because let's say in that case, my North Star metric is basically like my conversion rate of that particular offer, and my CTR should be directly correlated with my conversion rate. These should be sensitive enough so that these are measurable. The change detection is measurable within a particular timeline. And this is where you should be spending more time when your experimentation is running. Now comes your secondary metric. Now in secondary metric, what does it mean? That means these are the supportive metric alongside with your primary metric. Now your primary metrics makes the decision, hands down, no arguments there. But let's say if you need some more confirmation and just want to see if your secondary metric is also moving towards the same direction as your primary metric or not, then this is like a supportive metric which strengthens your story, right? So let's say in this case, if you are again measuring the same thing you offer in your SaaS product, then alongside with CTR, if you see that session lengths has also increased, that means people are probably reading out that particular offer. They're trying to understand more about what is the value prop from that particular offer. So these particular metrics are strengthening your point of view towards that, again, the go or no go signal for that experimentation altogether. So secondary metrics are also something that you should be definitely creating in your metric ladder alongside with your primary metric. Now let's say the next point is your guardrail metric. Now what is a guardrail metric? Now this is something that you are not necessarily trying to improve with your experimentation, but you will definitely abort or give a red signal for this experimentation to roll out if your guardrail metrics are declining. Like let's say if you have in this SaaS offer that we're talking about, if you have a very high bounce rate after your experimentation got introduced, then immediately there is something fishy in that particular experimentation and you need to either find out what is happening or you need to immediately abandon that experiment altogether, because bounce rate is something which is highly negative. That means there is something wrong with your feature altogether, and first diagnose that and only then come back. So guardrail metrics, again, just in one simple sentence, are those which you are not trying to improve, but you will definitely avoid if they degrade or decline, right? So now comes diagnostic metrics. As talked about, these are the metric which you would need to definitely investigate further if something unexpected happens, right? So let's say if your bounce rate is high, you need to find out why is your bounce rate high. Is it high from a particular device? Is it high from a particular region? Is it high from a particular customer base? You won't know and understand until and unless you are diving deeper. So diagnostic metrics are something which wouldn't be affecting your decision otherwise, but if something is going wrong, then these are the ones that will help you find out what is wrong and what can we do to further make it better, right? So these are the ones that helps you tell a better story. Always, whenever we are doing some kind of a root cause explanation, the diagnostic metrics are the one thing that helps us dive deeper, right? So these are very impactful. Now this was the whole metric ladder. Now let me go to some examples gradually from, let's say, easy to intermediate to hard problems, so that you yourself can understand if you are able to grasp the whole concept and able to create this whole metric ladder with me or not. Now the first problem that we will talk about is the introduction of Reels tab in Instagram. So let's say you know that this is, let's say if it's Instagram screen, then you have your different stories on top, then you have your feed here, and then you have some options in the middle, and then you have a Reels tab as well. So we want to understand that whenever Instagram started to include, let's say this is the Reels tab, then what are the rigorous metrics ladder would have looked like at the starting of introduction of this, right? So again, pause the video, take your time to design the overall ladder and then come back. Now, let's look at the solution of this problem, right? So we will definitely look at the North Star first, then we'll look into primary metric, we will look into our secondary metric, we will look into our guardrail metric, and then we will come to the diagnostic ones as well, but that will be at the end. So for North Star metric, again, we are not changing our overall North Star just for this particular product, right? So let's say for a content management platform like Instagram, what will be the main thing? They would definitely want to pull you inside the overall environment. That means you need to understand what is the overall time spent, right, by an active user daily, maybe, right? Because Instagram is something which people use daily. So we definitely want to understand what is the daily active user time spent as North Star metric, and this might not change even with inclusion of Reels tab as well, because this is a North Star metric that is getting tracked for the overall business. Now let's come to the primary metric, which is very specific to this particular experiment. And what do you think this might be? So when we are just introducing a particular option in the below, let's say, tab, that means, or we are including a particular tab, that means first we want to understand how many people are clicking on it, right? That means another way is how many people are starting it. At the starting, whenever we are introducing something, we just want to understand how many people are starting it, because in the immediate point itself, people will take time to find it. although we have introduced a new feature, it's new to the users, so they will take their sweet time to find out where is the Reels tab introduced, how to look into it, where to start, etc., etc. So definitely clicking on the tab or starting of the tab itself is a very good metric in this case. And we need to understand that how many reel starts actually happened. Let's take a moving window, because when you introduce a new feature, not necessarily everybody will find it in the first day itself. So let's take 7-day window, right? So in the first 7-day, or let's take 14-day window, either 7-day or 14-day window, how many reel tab starts happened? Right? So that can be a very good primary metric. Now the secondary metric here could be that what is the watch time or dwell time in the reels section. Like after opening it, once you click on it or start it, are you staying on that particular section, or you just coming out? So definitely dwell time can be a secondary metric, a very good supportive metric on top of your primary metric. Now why is dwell time not your primary metric? As I mentioned at the starting itself, we cannot just force users to spend a lot more time, because it's a new feature. They will take their time, and slowly the dwell time will increase, and people will know automatically where the Reels tab is, and then we will focus more on dwell time rather than clicking and start. But at the starting, this makes more sense. Now for guardrail metric, what do you think would happen? Now for guardrail metric, let me take another segment as well, because we definitely want to measure something here. Whenever we are introducing a new feature, that means there is a very high chance of something else getting pushed down. Let's say your feed engagement rate, if it's going down or not. Definitely that is something we want to understand, that if your feed engagement rate is going down, if your story views or story engagement rate is going down, story views per user itself is going down. This is purely, let's say, from the kind of cannibalization point of view. Whenever you are adding a new toy, let's say, in your overall toy collection for a child, right? So he or she will generally just go ahead and play with the new toy. That means he or she is forgetting about all the earlier toys that was there. That is basically nothing but cannibalization. So whenever we are introducing some new features, users tend to forget about your older features as well. So there is a heavy cannibalization that might be happening, and we want to understand that at what cost are we introducing this new feature. So these two things we need to measure as guardrail metric. Also, we need to understand, let's say, if there is a lot of bounce rate that's happening, if people are even opening the app or not. These two things we definitely need to understand. If people are bouncing off the platform altogether, that means they are not either able to find out any meaning out of the reels, or they are not liking or enjoying, or overall app opening could be indicator of if they are not enjoying coming to the platform. That means the app opening rate itself has declined quite a bit. So these two are heavy guardrail metric that are very, very crucial to the overall business. So we shouldn't be declining these at any cost, right? So definitely make sure that we are measuring these two as guardrail metric as well. Now coming to the diagnostic metrics. Now, as I mentioned, your diagnostic metric could be where from are your people or users are coming in, where are the reels starting from? Is it from the tab? Is it from some explore option? Is it from in feed? What is exactly happening? Where are they starting? So based on that, we will actually need to place our next iteration in a better way. Also, we want to understand where is the exit point. So after exiting, are the users going back to the feed, or after exiting they're just bouncing off completely, and at what point in time as well. So that is something that we are already measuring up top at secondary metric itself. We need to correlate that with the exit step as well, just to understand if we are negatively impacting the overall platform somehow. Also, we need to understand our overall user segments that is engaging with the reel. Are those, what is the customer demographic behind it? Is that majorly certain age range, certain region, certain gender, or certain customer base altogether who has more affinity towards video content, etc. So different user segments is something that we need to check for, just to understand that everything is staying positive and everything is making sense at the end. So again, notice this is what we just talked about, the overall problem of adding the Reels tab for Instagram. What is the North Star, the primary metric, your secondary metric, your guardrail and diagnostic metrics. This is how it changes, and it should be properly detailed out before you even start the experiment. So now comes a section of kind of like a corollary here, which is basically me talking to you about a composite metric. Now, what is exactly a composite metric? Now, whenever we are very new to this whole experimentation and design, etc., that time we tend to think that our overall goal for a particular experiment or feature will be just one thing. It will be, let's say, the primary metric or the North Star metric, but it is rarely ever just one. We actually have a different set of metrics that we are trying to kind of optimize with each other and balance the overall situation out, just to make sure that your overall story is standing and it's making sense without hurting your. This is a concept that I want to cover before going to the next example, because this is going to be coming in handy for our next example. Now, let me give you a quick point of view on what composite metrics look like. Now, let's say for Google search, right? So you have your different metrics that you want to improve. You want to definitely improve your search relevance. That means you want to showcase all the important value bearing URLs only to the users or audience who is searching for a particular topic. So relevance is highly important. Then definitely speed. We don't want people to be waiting. You know the search speed of Google, right, as browser. So definitely it is extremely important, and it has improved over the time, making it in milliseconds. So speed is extremely important, otherwise people will just leave. Then we definitely need to have coverage. We need to have a very wide coverage of what all topics we want to cover, because there can be millions of billions greatly indexed, so that we can get a relevant result within a very short period of time, and it's properly indexed basically. And of course, we need to make sure one other thing which is very important, that is it's a safe content that we are showing. It shouldn't be NSFW content that we can showcase. We have to make sure that all these 4 points are getting covered highly. So again, let's say if we are trying to optimize something in Google search, do we optimize all the 4 together? That means we'll have multiple primary metrics, and that becomes a problem on its own. Now, to avoid such thing, Google actually came up with something called OEC, which is nothing but your overall evaluation criterion, which is nothing but a weighted average or weighted calculation of all the metrics that I just talked about, right? So if you have multiple metrics as well in your business, then you can create your different weights associating with different metrics and then combine all of it together to make sure one particular composite metric is actually indicating your overall health of the business. So make sure that your weight decisions are, absolutely business based, business backed, or all the metrics are normalized, and then your final metric, composite metric, is sensitive enough to be tracked in the experimentation window, and it's aligning perfectly with all the historical experiments that you have done. And only then you should be going ahead with your OEC. Now, in this particular example, we will talk about Amazon's buy box experimentation. Now, what exactly is Amazon's buy box? Now, let's find out here. Let's say this is Amazon's page, and I have searched for something such as very generic, like mobile phone. And for mobile phone, I'm seeing many different results, like let's say Apple iPhone, OnePlus Nord, etc. So let me go ahead and click on Apple iPhone, right? Once I click on Apple iPhone, if you see that I'm able to see all the product specifications, the features and whatnot, but on the side, I have one particular section which is called as buy box within Amazon, which is nothing but your both the CTAs, add to cart and buy now, right? Now, what is this experimentation all about? Now, if you see that right now, the link that I have clicked is being sold by ClickTech Retail Private Limited. What does this mean? It means this particular item or this particular product is being sold by multiple different retailers who are part of Amazon itself. And whenever we are searching for something in query, algorithm also works quite heavily in here. They try to optimize for different metrics together from seller's point of view, just to make sure that as a buyer, I'm able to see the best possible seller combination for me at that particular point in time, right? So what are the different metrics that Amazon is optimizing for whenever I'm searching for a particular keyword? Is that, let's say from seller's point of view, just to make sure they are showing us the best seller possible, they want to make sure that they have enough revenue, right? They have enough units sold in the history in maybe last 3 months or 6 months, and let's say they want to understand what is the customer satisfaction with that particular seller, overall historically, and what is the seller health like, how has the seller been altogether, has there been any complaint, has there been any delay, has there been any active or non-activeness from the seller side, etc. So they combine all of these things to create a composite metric, right? Or something like a OEC, as we talked about earlier, to make sure that they are just optimizing for that particular metric to showcase only the best sellers whenever something is getting searched. So OEC needs to be a very optimized metrics for the correct reasons. Now let's pause the video here, and again I'm restating the problem. Let's say Amazon has come up with an OEC, but we need to now measure that if it's performing well or not, if it's highlighting the correct sellers, or if it's not deviating our buyer experience at all. So what kind of metric ladder would you create to understand if OEC is performing well or not, right? So let's take some time, pause the video, find out your solution, and then let's come back to find out my solution. Okay, now let's go ahead to find out that how would I design my experiment, or how would I design my metric system to make sure that I understand if OEC is performing the way it should be or not, right? So what all metrics are there? Let's say I have my primary metrics, I have my secondary metrics, again I have the guardrail, and let's say I have since this is a little more complex problem, I need to look into some long horizon metrics as well, and don't worry, I will explain all of this. So my North Star again would be, in this case, just to understand, if my revenue or my conversion rate is staying intact or not, or let us start from primary metric altogether. Now in this case, I think since we are trying to optimize for OEC, from seller's point of view, we definitely want to make sure that buyers are buying the product, right? We definitely want to understand the revenue generated per session. So whenever we are optimizing for some kind of seller OEC or buy box OEC, then we definitely want to understand if the revenue per session has increased or not. That means we are only featuring the topmost sellers to the buyers. So buyers should automatically be buying this, right? So they should have better revenue per session with this kind of optimized algorithm implemented for OEC, right? So that is general expectation. So definitely the primary metric should be this. Now in terms of secondary metric, we can find out something like if the dwell time has increased or not, if people are looking at or engaging with different portions of the page or not, maybe looking at the seller details or not. So these we can find out from different heat maps. I'll be able to understand what are their reviews, their stars, any customer refund policy, shipping policy, etc., etc. So every little detail that I could know as a buyer for that particular seller, I'd be able to understand. So I, as a secondary metric, would definitely try to understand, let's say, what is the dwell time, what's the heat map, what are the different things that the buyers are engaging with, and if they are drifting out or not, right? Now, what are the guardrails? The guardrails are one of the most important things in this particular example. We would definitely want to understand if people are leaving or not, but that is from buyer side. You have to essentially understand that businesses like Amazon have two sides. They have the seller side as well as the buyer side, right? We need to understand as a guardrail that if sellers are even participating or not. If we are optimizing for a particular algorithm where, let's say, only some of the sellers are getting highlighted where rest of them are just being pushed down the queue, that means over the time, many sellers would not even see the light of day while, some particular query is getting searched. So if they stopped getting impressions or generating impressions from their site, then they will eventually leave the platform. They won't participate in this run altogether. They won't spend their time or energy or money. So definitely we want to make sure that this particular new algorithm with EOS OEC that we have implemented is not hurting or negatively impacting the seller's participation rate at any cost. So this is definitely a guardrail that we need to measure. Now, in terms of long horizon, we would want to understand what has been the overall health of our platform, which is not revenue per session, but rather what has been the repeat purchase. That means if we are, let's say, after suggesting the product to the buyer, let's say buyer also buys it from that particular seller, but if they like the product and they like the overall engagement from the seller, only then would they come back and come back for a repeat purchase. So in the long horizon, just to understand if our overall health of the platform or the feature is working well or not, we definitely need to understand if people are coming back for different categories altogether. The insight or the takeaway from this example is if you are working for a marketplace or something which has two-sided business, right? Sellers and buyers, can be your Uber, can be Airbnbs, can be your Zomato. We need to make sure that our metric ladder is essentially capturing both the sides. So hope you understood. Now let's move on to the second corollary. The second corollary here is nothing but if my metric can even detect the change or not. So this is something called as minimum detectable effect. So let's say before even dwelling or before even spending time on what should be my primary metric, my secondary metric, my metric ladder, etc., etc., I need to understand if my metric is sensitive enough to be tracking the change within the particular experimentation window. And the smaller the change, the higher time it will take for it to reflect statistically. So always make sure that your primary metric is highly relevant with the change that you're doing. Do not worry if you don't understand MDE completely, because we are going to cover MDE again in the next chapters. Now let's move on to the final capstone exercise that we talked about.
Before going to the capstone exercise, if you have liked our content so far, then please go and subscribe to our channel. The subscribe button is just, it will mean a lot to us. And also do drop comments to let what all other things do you want us to cover in the next segment.
So here is the problem statement. So let's say Google is testing a new search feature, right? So a new search feature by expanding their knowledge panel. Now what exactly is knowledge panel? Let me search, let's say, about a company. let's say Amazon, right? So if I search about Amazon, are you able to see that this is a section which is talking about what is this company, what is the website, what are the headquarters. So this is what is called the knowledge panel. And the hypothesis that they're trying to do is, let's say if I show more information or more structured information in the knowledge panel, then this will automatically satisfy the user intent and they won't have to go ahead clicking through a site just to get these information or get this information. So basically their hypothesis is that if I present some basic information about the keyword in a structured format, then it will just help the users or the audience in a much better way. They won't have to go through all these links just to find out these basic details, right? So that is what the overall hypothesis is, and that is what the experimentation is all about. Now think carefully just to make sure that whenever we roll this experiment out, then what are the different metrics that can showcase that if this is working for the betterment of the overall product or not, right? So let's pause the video, think for some time, and then let's come back and solve this problem. Okay. So again, let's think from the very first point of view that we talked about in the starting of this video, at what does success look like? If the audience or the users are able to get the information at the first glance itself, so they don't have to go through all the links. Or let's say if the task got completed or not, task completion rate, whatever you'd like to call it. There's nothing in the name. It's basically the intent that you're trying to capture from the metric is what matters. But then the point comes in, how do I measure either of these two? One way that we can find out, let's say if the customers are satisfied with what they are seeing or not, is that maybe there is a lower CTR on the URLs, right? If there is a lower CTR on the URLs, that means, let's say, if I'm able to find everything in this section, that means I'm not clicking in any of these links. So that can be one directional point of view, that lower CTR could be essentially tell that we have shown everything that they needed to know and then we are good. But then there can be counter argument here saying that users might not have found out what they wanted to find out in the knowledge section as well, and they just got frustrated and left. That can also result in lower CTR. So lower CTR is not only telling that they have found out what they wanted to, but it can also mean that they haven't found what they wanted to. So what, let's say, Google did in this case, or actual approach as they have depicted, is that they can use a combination of multiple metrics again here, right? So what kind of multiple metrics can they use here? One can be reformulation rate. So what exactly would be reformulation rate? That means if I haven't found what I wanted, that means I will search again, right? So I will again maybe change my query in some cases, maybe try to elaborate it or shorten it or add some particular more keywords just to make sure that I am getting what I want. So that is reformulation rate. So for reformulation rate is again nothing but if user is rephrasing their query or not, and if they are, then at what rate. Right? So here it can mean that if there is low reformulation, that means they are getting what they want. That's why they're leaving. So this is one very good indicator of the experiment being successful. Second could be, what is the session abandonment rate, or let's say bounce rate, right? So if you're talking about session abandonment rate, if the users are leaving the search session entirely or not, are they leaving it? Why are they leaving it? Now there can be two ways to look at this problem. I can be searching for information, and if I'm not searching for a particular information, then knowledge panel makes more sense. But let's say if I'm trying to buy a mobile phone, of course I don't care about knowledge panel, even if it's more structured, even if it's highly informative or not. I'm not even looking for that. So my intent itself is completely different. So if I am looking for a transactional query, then knowledge panel does not make sense to me, and I shouldn't be even bothering about looking at it. So whenever we are looking at, let's say, either of these metrics, like let's say reformulation rate, session abandonment rate, etc., we should be trying to understand what is the type of the query. Is it informative? Is it a transactional query or not? If it's an informational query and then the bounce rate is, bounce rate is very high and they're leaving the session immediately, let's say after a no click, that means it's actually a success. We can say that they are able to get the information, and the reformulation rate is also, let's say, not very high. That means they are able to get the information. For informational queries, it makes sense. But let's say for transactional queries, if the bounce rate is high, that means again we're doing something wrong. And on top of it, this whole experiment does not even make sense for transactional queries. So at the start itself, we need to make sure that what are we measuring, if that is making sense, and if that is something that we have expected the users to do or not, right? So the takeaway here would be, whenever this is a complex product and we are not able to kind of formulate at one go, then we need to understand if we need to divide our audience and then create some kind of aggregate or composite metric, and with particular weights, of course, and then find out if that is sensitive enough or not. Again, the same formula, the exact same steps that we have discussed so far in the video is only getting realized here. So define what is success, what do we need to measure, what does it look like. If it's not directly measurable, then what is the proxy metric, and if we need to create a composite metric in terms of proxy, and if that particular proxy is applicable only for a certain section or not. So this is how you should be walking through your answers in any interviews as well, just to make sure that you're not leaving any stones unturned, as well as it's completely relevant to the problem that you have at your hand.
Okay, so here we are at the end of this video. So again, this is just if you take care of these things one by one, and then based on all this, create a metric ladder, then everything should be good. You once you practice this over coming experiments, that's fine. Then you should be able to think like the best product teams across the world. And that's what is the goal of the video has always been. So again, if you haven't subscribed to the channel, please and let us know in the comments what are the different challenges that you have faced in this area while designing a metric. I would definitely love to know about all of this, and I would go through all the comments. So let me know, and we will meet you in the next one. Till then, take care. Bye.